You're not seriously objecting, are you?" Judge Frank Caprio leaned forward on the bench, peering over his glasses at the bobcat lounging on the defendant's chair. One paw flopped dramatically over the armrest, tail swishing with mock indifference. The bobcat didn't blink. He yawned. "You trespassed, destroyed city property, disrupted a traffic hearing, and then," Caprio's voice softened as he stifled a grin, "you sat on the plaintiff's briefcase like it was a throne." A low purr rumbled from the animal's chest. The courtroom chuckled. Even the bailiff cracked a smile. "Is there anything you'd like to say in your defense?" the judge asked theatrically. The bobcat blinked slowly, once, and then stretched his legs across the table. Caprio sighed, shaking his head. "Well, you've got more poise than most of the humans who stand here, but don't think you can charm your way out of this." And yet, he smiled. "This unforgettable true story will disarm your expectations, soften your judgment, and prove that even a courtroom has room for redemption, ritual, and just a little bit of chaos." Before we begin, if you've ever smiled watching Judge Caprio turn kindness into justice, tell us in the comments. What's your favorite moment of his, and where in the world are you watching from? It all started months earlier, before the eggs, before the cameras, before the courthouse door was ever left open, before the prankster Bobcat earned the judge's laughter. He earned a man's trust. Now let's go back to the beginning. The first sign wasn't destruction, it was precision. 3 parking tickets, torn not with teeth, but claws. Each rip clean, each fragment laid out on the east bench like a coded message. Ellis Monroe, mop in hand, paused when he saw them. He bent slowly, knees stiff with age, and traced the edge of one slip with his thumb. The tear curved, not jagged, but deliberate. He didn't speak, just glanced once at the door. The hallway was empty, too quiet. The next week, someone's lunch vanished from the break room. Tupperware lid placed back exactly as found, as if to apologize. Then a citation book disappeared from Clerk Ramirez's desk, only to reappear 2 days later in the stairwell, every page carefully scratched through with an unknown substance that looked suspiciously like pine sap. Security rewound the tapes, watched the grainy feed, and then, at 5:57 a.m., they saw it. A silhouette, 4-legged, low, calm. The bobcat stepped through the side entrance like a regular, tail flicking just once, no hesitation, no panic. He padded across the marble floor, paused silent, then sat on the eastern bench. Still, for 43 minutes. He didn't sniff, didn't explore. He simply faced the door. Judge Caprio, standing beside the monitor with arms crossed, said nothing at first. Then quietly, to no one in particular, "He's not lost." Ellis looked over. "Then what's he doing?" Caprio leaned in, slightly, voice quiet. "He's waiting." A pause. Ellis swallowed hard. "For what?" Caprio's hand brushed his chin, the faintest smile pulling at the edge of his mouth. "Maybe the same thing we're all waiting for." And on the screen, the bobcat didn't move. Not once, not until the sun broke over the horizon. The east bench was never meant to matter. It faced no window. It held no plaque, just a rusted angle beneath the courthouse archway, one of many, forgotten in routine. But Delgado had once made it his own. He sat there every morning, 15 minutes before roll call, drinking terrible gas station coffee from a thermos so battered it squeaked when the lid turned. He always faced the door, boots crossed, cap tucked just so. Quiet, steady. Until the morning he didn't come. The bench stayed. People passed it. Some noticed. Most didn't. But the bobcat did. Every morning. Same time, same stillness, same direction. At first, Ellis thought it was coincidence. An animal with a routine, a loop. But wild things don't keep time. Not unless they're taught to. Not unless something anchors them. Monroe never lingered more than 40 minutes. He came, he watched, he left. Never took food, never sought warmth, and never missed a day. One foggy Tuesday, a new hire from parking enforcement tried to deal with the animal. Clipboard in hand, boots loud, confidence unearned. He stomped toward the bench with a harsh whistle. Monroe didn't flinch. Instead, he leapt, clean, controlled, into the open file cart beside the clerk's station, shredded a single unpaid citation, and stared down the officer from 5 feet away. It wasn't aggression, it was punctuation. Caprio, walking in at that moment, stopped mid-step. "What's going on here?" he asked, voice unreadable. "Animal control's on the way," the officer muttered. Caprio's eyes never left Monroe. "Cancel it." "But, sir—" "I said cancel it." Monroe blinked. Slow. Then turned, leapt from the cart, and padded back to the bench. He resumed his post, like nothing had happened. It was supposed to be a normal Monday. Ellis had come in early. The sky was still the color of wet ash. Steam curled from the manhole covers like breath held too long. He left the back hallway door open, just a crack, while dumping the mop bucket outside. 5 minutes. That's all it took. When he came back inside, the hallway was too quiet. The stillness didn't feel like silence. It felt like presence. He followed it to courtroom A. The door was ajar. Inside, Monroe sat atop the judge's bench, precisely where Caprio usually placed his glasses when reading verdicts. The gavel lay next to the bobcat's paw, tilted, not yet disturbed. Ellis's breath caught in his throat. Then, thwack. The bobcat tapped the gavel. Once. The sound echoed with eerie finality. Ellis backed away, heart thudding. The alarm tripped. Red strobes lit the ceiling. Security scrambled over the E. Radio? Courtroom breach. Possible intruder. 2 guards rushed in, batons drawn. One aimed, shouting, "Get back! Animal on the bench!" Ellis raised both hands, shouting, "No, wait, he's not." But before he could finish, a calm voice cut through the noise like a blade through still water. "Stand down." Judge Caprio entered, coffee still in hand, eyes locked on Monroe. He walked to the center aisle, slow, deliberate. "Is this your courtroom now?" he asked softly. Monroe didn't move. Caprio placed his cup on the rail and, without looking at the guard, said, "Lower your weapons." The bobcat tapped the gavel again, just once. Then curled his tail neatly around his paws. Ellis saw it. Caprio saw it. That wasn't defiance. It was ritual. Ellis Monroe hadn't planned on working again, not after retirement, not after Daniel. He took the janitor job at the courthouse because it was close, quiet, and came with keys to a place that didn't ask for conversation. No one cared that he didn't speak much. They liked that he showed up early, left late, and cleaned the courtroom chairs like someone still believed in dignity. But Ellis never quite left the uniform behind. Not the ranger one, not the father one. He carried it all with him, in the weight of his step, the way he still scanned rooftops, the way he still checked shadows before entering a room. That's why Monroe unsettled him. Not because he was wild, because he was patterned. Same path, same hour, same bench, same grief. Ellis had seen it before in returning wolves that howled at empty dens, in elk mothers nudging the stillborn long after the forest forgot. Animals don't mourn like we do, but they do mourn. And Monroe's pranks, the files, the gavel, the bench, weren't mischief. They were memory. Ellis hadn't said a word to anyone, not even Caprio, but he started bringing hard-boiled eggs in his lunch bag, quiet offerings left on the cold ground near the radiator pipe Monroe favored. The bobcat never ate them, not at first, but he stayed longer, watched Ellis more closely. One morning, Ellis swore he heard the faintest purr, barely audible over the heater's hum. He didn't move. He just kept cleaning. Because sometimes staying is louder than speaking. Ellis didn't approach the bench. Not yet, but he stopped pretending to clean it. Most mornings, he'd mop nearby, quietly, always within view. Some days, he'd sit on the far end, silent, still, while Monroe perched at the other, eyes trained on the door. The door, always that same door. The one Officer Delgado used on his last day. The one Daniel walked through when he sat in court for a friend's hearing. The day Ellis didn't show up, the day he should have said something, done something. That door held too many ghosts, and now the Bobcat watched it like he remembered them too. One morning, just past 6 o'clock, Monroe arrived late. Not by much, but enough for Ellis to worry. The fog was thicker that day, the courthouse shrouded like a secret. Ellis was already sitting, coffee cooling in his thermos, hands idle on his knees. Then, soft pads on marble. He looked up. Monroe walked straight past the doors, ignored the bench, came within 6 feet. Saturday, and stared, not at the door, at him. Ellis didn't speak. He didn't blink. He just held that gaze and let the moment swell around them like rising light. 6 feet. No barrier, no warning, just trust. Monroe blinked once, slow, then stretched, turned, and walked away. Not because he feared Ellis, because he didn't need to say anything else, not yet. But it was coming. The moment it changed came not with movement, but with stillness. Ellis sat on the bench, boots muddy from the alley, fingers wrapped around a lukewarm thermos. It had rained all night. The air was heavy with petrichor, the smell of wet stone and dying leaves. Monroe didn't come from the shadows this time. He came from the front, head up, limp pronounced, but eyes steady. He walked directly to the bench, paused just beside Ellis's boot, and sat, not facing the door, not facing the room, facing him. Ellis lowered the thermos to the ground. His chest felt tight, not from fear, from memory. For a long moment, neither moved. Then, with no drama, no flourish, Monroe leaned forward and pressed his forehead gently to Ellis's shin. Just once. Then leaned back. Bobcats have no instinct to seek comfort from humans. They are solitary, territorial, elusive. But Monroe had chosen something ancient. Presence over protection. And Ellis? He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding for years. That was the moment everything broke. The silence, the distance, the assumption that grief couldn't be shared across species. And in that brief, breathless second, Ellis knew. This wasn't just an animal seeking shelter. It was a soul-seeking witness. If you've ever experienced a moment of perfect understanding with an animal, hit that subscribe button now to join others who believe connection doesn't always need words. Tell us in the comments, what was the moment an animal made you feel seen, truly seen, for who you are? Ellis didn't sleep that night. He sat at his kitchen table, half-drunk coffee cooling in a chipped mug, eyes fixed on a single thought. If I help him, I might break him. Monroe was injured. The limp was worse now, barely noticeable when he first arrived weeks ago, but now undeniable. He moved slower, rested longer, flinched more often before standing. The pain wasn't loud. It was persistent, hidden beneath composure. Ellis knew that type of pain. He'd seen it in Daniel's eyes, in the way he'd shift his weight in his chair, pretending he wasn't hurting, in the way he'd leave the room during laughter. Pride doesn't scream. It retreats. That's what Monroe was doing, and now Ellis had a decision. He could call Wildlife Services. Marcy, a friend from his ranger days, still worked rehab out by the state line. She had space, resources, but protocol required containment, cages, observation, forced treatment. Would Monroe understand? Would he come back? Would he feel betrayed? The animal had made the first move, trusted him, sat beside him, touched him, to respond with capture. Ellis's hand hovered over his phone. He thought of the egg he left that morning, untouched. But not because Monroe didn't want it, because he wanted choice. So Ellis waited. He texted Marcy. Injured bobcat, not aggressive, may need treatment. Will call when he's ready. He didn't press send. He saved it as a draft. Because sometimes love isn't rescuing. Sometimes it's staying ready, until trust opens the door. Excellent. Now that the emotional foundation has been built, we'll shift the tone into a warm, humorous, and smile-inducing resolution without losing the philosophical undertone. These next 4 sections, sections 9 to 12, bring closure through light-hearted moments, unexpected wisdom, and a final send-off filled with warmth and quiet wonder. Each section remains exactly 300 words, featuring comedic beats rooted in character truth while maintaining the atmosphere and depth of the story. It wasn't supposed to be funny, but of course it was. The morning Monroe waltzed into traffic court like he owned the place, 3 cases behind schedule, Judge Frank Caprio had just finished saying, "I think we've seen everything by now." Then the Bobcat pushed the door open with his face. Gasps echoed. One woman screamed. A baby started giggling. Monroe, limping slightly but walking tall, sauntered down the aisle with all the pageantry of a defense attorney who'd seen the prosecution's weak spot. Caprio didn't move. He just blinked, then leaned forward. "Well," he said, "I stand corrected." Monroe stopped in front of the judge's bench, sat, and, without breaking eye contact, placed a crumpled traffic ticket on the floor like a peace offering. Laughter rippled through the room. The bailiff froze. The clerk covered her mouth. Caprio looked at Ellis, who'd appeared in the doorway with a raised brow and the resigned look of a man watching his student make mischief on picture day. "Mr. Monroe," the judge said gravely, "is it true you've been impersonating court staff?" Monroe yawned. Loudly. "Contempt of court," Caprio added. 5 more eggs for sentencing." The laughter rose again, soft, genuine, alive. For once, the courthouse wasn't heavy with guilt or rules. It was something else. Light, human. Ellis watched the judge smile like he hadn't in weeks. And the Bobcat? He curled up beneath the bench like it was always meant for him. Judge Caprio insisted on it. If Monroe wants to attend proceedings, he needs a proper seat. That's how the courthouse ended up with a handmade cedar bench in the corner of courtroom A, embroidered with a patch that read, Office of Animal Affairs, Honorary Observer. Marcy, called in at last for a quiet evaluation, confirmed Monroe's injury had improved dramatically. "No infection, full weight bearing in another 2 weeks. Scar tissue will stay," she said, rubbing the Bobcat's shoulder gently. "But he's not just healing, he's comfortable." Ellis snorted. "He's got a better chair than I do." Monroe, sprawled with one paw dangling over the cushion, seemed to agree. He now had a routine. He'd arrive before sunrise, nap through early arraignments, and occasionally interrupt mid-sentence by sneezing, yawning, or stretching so dramatically the stenographer had to pause. Caprio never scolded him. Instead, he'd say, "If Monroe objects, I'm inclined to take his point." One morning, a teenager with his 3rd parking violation burst out, "Why do I get fined, but the cat gets a bed?" Caprio didn't miss a beat. "Because he doesn't park on sidewalks, son." Even Monroe blinked like he approved. Word spread. People began showing up early just to catch a glimpse. One local newspaper ran the headline, "Claw and Order, Bobcat Brings Balance to the Bench." But beneath the smiles, the laughter, the Instagram reels, there was something truer. Monroe had stopped prowling. He wasn't searching anymore. He was home. The last day didn't feel like goodbye. It felt like a good joke told with perfect timing. It was spring again. Blossoms dusted the edge of the parking lot. Ellis arrived to find the bench empty, the gavel untouched. But there was something else. A feather, bright, blue, laid gently on the bench like a bookmark left on a closed story. Monroe didn't come that morning, or the next. But Caprio didn't frown. He sat in his chair, looked at the spot in the corner, and said softly, "Well played, Your Honor." No drama, no crisis, just a quiet knowing. Monroe had left on his own terms, strong again, whole, unburdened, and with flair, of course. Over the next week, people still asked, "Where's the cat?" Ellis just smiled and shrugged. Off being dignified somewhere. But occasionally, on foggy mornings or quiet evenings, someone would swear they saw him, crossing the lawn, disappearing into trees, watching from rooftops like a fuzzy little magistrate judging humanity, one raised eyebrow at a time. Caprio commissioned a plaque for the bench, in memory of Monroe, friend, felon, philosopher. He waited. Where ghosts sit. They didn't cry, they chuckled, and when pigeons landed on the bench and flapped off in alarm, Caprio would murmur, "Still holding court, huh?" And somewhere beyond Providence, a bobcat limped a little less. Because the ones we laugh with, they never really leave. Some stories fade when they end. This one? It echoes. Months passed. Monroe never returned. But the courthouse was different now. Lighter. Visitors stopped to read the plaque. Tourists asked about the gavel cat. Kids brought plush bobcats to traffic court. Someone even designed a sticker that said, "Objection, your paws." Ellis still worked mornings, still mopped the floors. But sometimes he lingered longer by the east bench. Not to wait, to remember. He'd sit, drink from that same battered thermos, and catch Judge Caprio watching the empty corner. And smiling. Because the truth is, Monroe never belonged to them. He was never domesticated, never tamed. But he gave them something wilder. Permission to laugh, to heal, to carry the weight without letting it drown them. And he did it by tipping a gavel and stealing a few sandwiches. Caprio once said in an interview, "I've sentenced thousands of people. But that one? He ruled the room." When asked if he missed the bobcat, he simply replied, "Every day." But not sadly. Just like you miss a punchline you didn't see coming. If this story made you smile, hit that subscribe button to honor the strange, beautiful ways we find healing. And in the comments, let's do something different today. Leave a thank you for Judge Frank Caprio for reminding us that justice doesn't always have to be harsh. Sometimes it can purr.